Hey everybody. Okay, so this recording is about this package of readings we have. Okay, I'll just refer to the first part of it as Bassham, even though technically Bassham, Irwin, Nardone, and Wallace all edited this book. They all deserve credit for that. But really, do you want me saying that every time? No. So I'll just call it Bassham. And here are the things that you should know about this book. So I know a lot of people think that philosophy is just people stating their opinions, right? And so a lot of people think that philosophy, as just a statement of opinions, is that it's how do I want to say? It's like the wishy-washiest of all things, because you could say whatever you wanted. Actually, though, and I know this may not be apparent at first, but trust me, it's true. Philosophy actually follows very tight, very rigorous rules for how you can put your words and ideas together. So there are lots of things in philosophy that anyone trained in philosophy would say, whoa, that doesn't make sense. Okay? In the same way that there's lots of things that a scientist, say a physicist, will know. If you'll say, well, this is how the moon rotates around the sun, or this is what happens in a car wreck, it'll seem like you're thinking clearly, but the expert, the one who knows in science, will say, no, that's not how it works. Now, that's not the physicist being bossy. That's not the physicist ignoring your opinion or your own personal experience. It's just that they are trained in a certain way of thinking, science, physics, experimental method, that clarifies and purifies the everyday ways that you and I experience, physical things in the world. Right? So scientists, most often, they don't tell us things that are mind-blowing every day. A lot of what they do is they take things we sort of already know or feel or understand, and they just say, hey, if you follow the rules of science, you'll have a more clear way of understanding. Not that you're dumb and the scientist is smart, not what you think you see. You think you see the sun going around the earth, right? You think you see it going overhead. When actually it's more like we're underneath it spinning, would be, even that's not perfectly accurate, but that's closer to the truth. Okay? The scientist isn't trying to play gotcha. They're not trying to make you feel dumb. They're not trying to, take over the world and make you, the bottom of the totem pole. They're just saying, hey, we all are pretty close to the truth in our day-to-day lives, but science gives us a little more precision, a little more control over the world as we use it. It's just a little bit closer to the truth than you and I in everyday experience. Now, the reason they do that isn't, as I said, it isn't because they're smarter than you are. It's that they follow certain rules of thought. Okay? They double-check their first impulse. They test ideas they have. They talk about their ideas with other people, other scientists in this case, and see if their thoughts hold up to other people's questions. Now, in a sense, that's all philosophy does too. Not everyone knows this, but science was originally an offshoot of philosophy. It was called natural philosophy because it studied the natural world. It now has an independence and momentum all its own, but send me an email if you want to hear more about this. But basically it was the rigorous rule-following thinking of philosophy that first made science possible. And then, the teacher or the student sort of outgrew the teacher. Science became its whole own independent way of thinking. But philosophy for a long time was the only form of thinking that followed clear logical rules, that tried to avoid making mistakes, that double-checked its ideas, and tried to give reasons for why what it said was true. Reasons, not just why the individual speaking thought it was true, but reasons that in general people could see the sense of and also believe. Okay? Basically, philosophy is what got people to stop believing in superstition and magic, etc. It used to be occasionally frogs would fall from the sky. Now that's hard to make sense of, right? So people would say, well, it's a witch, or God is angry at us, or frogs, birds transform into frogs, or something like that. Because how the heck do you make sense of that, right? Well, it was first philosophers who said things like, I mean, you don't normally see animals changing into other animals. And people would say, well, I read it in a book somewhere. It happens. I read it in the poetry of Ovid. Like, well, okay. And it was first them who got to say things like, hey, there's no cause without an effect. There's no effect without a cause. Which science developed into, a whole other direction. Right? So again, that's a whole history lesson that I'm not doing a good job convincing you of it now because I'm not trying to. All I'm trying to convince you of is that in the same way that science takes what seems to be true and it has a very precise set of rules that it follows in order to test if what seems true is actually real, actually true, it applies that to the natural world. Philosophy applies it to ideas, experiences, descriptions about the world. Not so much about the world, but about the human being. So in philosophy, there's certain things you sort of have to do. And there's certain things you can't do and still claim to be speaking logically and clearly. That's what this book, these sections of these books we're doing is. Okay? They're the basic introduction to how to double check your thoughts and see if they could be made more clear to you, more clear to others, if you could strengthen what you already know, and say it or write it in such a way that it's very clear and convincing to others. All right? So, I'm not going to summarize for you the first 3.5 pages, okay, because I know you can understand that stuff on your own. It's all very important. I just don't need to restate their points. But I will focus on something here on page 4 going over to 6. Consistency and logical correctness. Okay? You've already seen in our readings many times, the authors will say, some other people, not me the author, but some other people believe such and such a claim. And then there's different methods to do this, but what they'll do is they'll show that claim that other people think can't possibly be true because it somehow is inconsistent or contradicts itself. Okay, so that's what this consistency and logical correctness section is about. Lots of people think ideas that seem true. But then what will happen is that same idea which seems true, when you try to apply it more fully, it'll end up contradicting itself. So you know how you can catch someone in a lie, right? They say, no, I wasn't at the bar last night. Certainly not. I was at Jody's house. And that seems true. Okay, yeah, Jody has a house. They're friends. This person talking and Jody are friends. Yeah, maybe they're at Jody's house instead of the bar. But you can catch someone when they're lying if you just keep asking more questions about what they say. And often if you ask them enough questions, they'll end up saying two things that are contradictory. You know what I mean? They'll say two things that can't possibly both be true at the same time. Okay? And then they're a lie. They're lying. For instance, if they tell you they're at Jody's house, but then you say, okay, how did you get to Jody's house? And they said something like, I walked there, and it's too far away to walk, or Jody lives on an island, so they couldn't have walked there. You see, you've caught them. They've said two things which cannot be both true. That's what consistency means here, is when all of your statements can consistently fit with each other, that if one is true and the other is true, there's no misfit, mismatch. Now, philosophy is not so much about catching other people in lies. It's making sure that our own thoughts are fully consistent. I'll just give you an example. Okay? You ask a lot of people, what's the most important thing to you? And they'll say, well, it's my family. Okay? Now, then you can ask them further. You go, okay, if something's the most important thing to you, it should come before other things, right? Yeah. And if you had to choose between that most important thing and a less important thing, you'd choose the most important thing most of the time, right? Yeah. That's just what those words mean. And if you mean something else by most important, I don't know what that could mean, right? But then what happens if that person is always choosing work over their family, or time with their friends over their family, or being out of town instead of being with their family. If they're always choosing something else over family, then something's not right there. Again, my point is not to call such people liars. I'm making it sound that way. I don't mean it that way. But what I mean is that what's consistent is if you say XYZ is the most important, and in general you choose XYZ over less important things. You choose it first, you do it the most often, you put the most effort into it, whatever it might be. But here's somehow your behavior has to be consistent with your words. Or else you're using words differently from the rest of us, or you mean something, your behavior doesn't match what you're saying. Okay? Sometimes logical correctness can be a little more clear, and that's what pages 5 and 6 go over. Ignore the religious stuff of it, that's not the point. Okay? The point is basically this. If you can say that God sees all things, and then you say, well, God sees these things, because he sees all things, but he doesn't see those things, then you're saying two things which, whatever your religious beliefs, okay, whether you're atheist, Catholic, Hindu, Protestant, agnostic, half Catholic, half Hindu, whatever, that statement is impossible to be true because it's logically, meaning just like the pure ideas themselves, it's logically self-contradictory. It doesn't make any sense, no matter what your personal beliefs, no matter what your religion, to say that God sees all things and that he doesn't see some things. Because then you're saying God sees all things and God does not see all things in the same sentence. Do you see logically there's only three possibilities? God sees everything, God sees nothing, or God sees some things. Now you can say any one of those ideas. That's your choice. But just like scientists are sort of locked into certain rules if they want to do science, if you want to talk to other people, like I said, you can choose to believe that God sees everything, or you can choose to believe that God sees nothing, or you can choose to believe that God sees some things. So, not everything, but not nothing either. Those are the only three possibilities in any logical way of thinking. And you can pick any one of those because all of those would make sense. But if the one that you believe is God sees all things, and then you also say, well, he doesn't see me, he doesn't see under my clothes, or he doesn't see when it's dark at night, or he doesn't see everybody, but only some people, then you've said an idea that you can't even believe. It's like saying square circle. Again, if you say God sees some things, then you could say he sees this thing but not that thing. But once you've made the choice to say God sees all things, it no longer makes any sense to say God can't see through your bathrobe. Somehow you got to revise what you mean. You say, well, God sees metaphorically, or God knows all things, or God could see anything that he chooses to look at, but he doesn't choose to look at those things. You see how those changes will fit. They were consistent with what went before. Okay. So, one way to think about what philosophy is it's sort of like geometry. I've already said it's sort of like science. It is. It's also sort of like geometry. In geometry, once you've defined a line as the shortest point between or sorry, the shortest distance between 2 points. Let me do that again. Once you've defined in geometry that a line is, it's this and only this, it's the shortest distance between any 2 points. Okay, once you've defined something that way, you stick with it, right? You don't go around then calling lines curves, or you don't go around calling lines three-dimensional objects with volume, right? You said, no, it's this and only this, shortest distance between any 2 points. Now, once you've done that, you're locked in, right? You're committed to being consistent, to saying that again. Philosophy is the same way. You don't have to talk about lines if you don't want to. You don't have to talk about God, what God sees and what he doesn't. But once you've made a certain claim, there's other ideas that will fit with it, and there's other ideas that will not fit with it. For instance, once you say a line is the shortest distance between 2 points, you've made it impossible to logically, consistently say that lines can ever be curved. If it's curved, it has to be something other than a line. Geometers call it an arc, but the word doesn't matter, because you see how any curve, that is, any line which is not straight, is not the shortest distance, but some longer distance between 2 points. Now, if this isn't immediately apparent to you, draw a line between 2 points and measure it with a ruler. Then draw a curved line and measure it with the ruler, which is difficult, but you'll see the curved line's always longer. Makes sense, right? Because it goes the same distance, but it sort of curves out of the way. It does extra work to get to the same distance. Okay, so that's all philosophy is the author is trying to give you a set of statements that if the first things, like the definition of a line, make sense, you're going to add them to other ideas. If any of the two ideas clash or don't fit or are inconsistent with each other, you can't stick them together. Just like you can't make a square be a circle or a circle be a square. They're just incompatible, inconsistent. And your job in the papers and in philosophy class in general is seeing why certain ideas are consistent or fit with each other, and seeing why some ideas clash, square circle, can't be thought together at the same time, or don't belong in the same set of arguments or claims. So that's all, right? And I'm using that one section to touch on a lot of the different issues in this Bassham reading. Okay? That's all philosophy is. It's not people trying to catch you like in how lawyers cross-examine people and try to trick them, right? It's not other people trying to be smarter than you. It's just that everyone benefits from clearer, more consistent thoughts. Philosophers try to make their own thoughts more consistent. And your job in philosophy class and writing papers in philosophy is to make your own ideas more consistent. Now you might say, who cares if my ideas are consistent? We can be cynical about this if you don't mind. If your ideas are inconsistent, that is, if you're saying two things at the same time that just don't fit together, that if one's true, then the other one can't be true, but you're saying you think both are true, other people notice. Do people notice when you draw a curved line when you're supposed to draw a straight line? Heck yes, they do. If someone asks you what your favorite color is and you say blue-red, or they ask you what your favorite shape is, not a question you get a lot, but follow the metaphor, and you say a square circle, they're going to notice. Now, what they do when they notice, lots of people do different things. But do you think you're going to get very far in life if you say that your favorite color is red-black or black-white? And I don't mean gray, but you mean it's black-white. You think you're going to get very far when your boss tells you to please draw only straight lines, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't? Sometimes you call a straight line an arc, and sometimes you call an arc an arc. You know what I mean? They're going to be confused. You're not going to get promoted faster at work when you confuse your boss. So like I said, that's just the cynical thing. That's why philosophy is useful to everyone. That's why critical thinking is useful to everyone, because when you make your ideas more consistent, other people believe them more. They respect what you say more. They will understand what you mean more. And they'll listen to what you say longer if what you're saying is consistent and makes sense. And that's what goes over to pages 7, 8, 9, right? Why critical thinking, which is basically just clarifying your ideas, making them consistent, making them clear to other people. That's where Bassham and all them detail why that's so important, or so useful, rather. Okay, this section on relativism, page 19 and 20, is very important. A lot of people when they first approach philosophy, or when they first approach ethics as a kind of philosophy, when they're reading philosophy in general, they think, well, the philosopher keeps telling me what they think is right or wrong. But everyone's got different opinions. So they think, well, the philosopher's telling me what they think is absolutely right and wrong for all people for all time, but I'm not sure I agree, and surely other people disagree. So there's no right or wrong truth. There's just different people's opinions. Now, there's lots of reasons why it makes sense to think something like that. There's something to that. So I want you to read the Bassham there, 19 and 20. It's pages 8 and 9 of the PDF file, but you know what's printed in the book I scanned is pages 19 and 20. And I want you to read it very carefully. And here's something I'll ask you to do. Please send me any questions you have or arguments against what Bassham says there, because I know this is not an easy point. So basically, send me any comments you have, any questions you have about what's called relativism here, and you and I can talk more about it. Okay? Because it's very important. I won't go through all of what Bassham says there. My point is just this. If you think that all there are just opinions, you expose yourself to some very unpleasant side effects of that idea. Okay? One of them is this: on any moral or ethical issue, if you say there are no right or wrong answers, there's only opinions, and everyone's opinion is equally valid, then when somebody has very unpleasant or nasty ethical, moral views, cannibalism is fine, incest is fine, genocide is fine, or maybe they even think those things are required. I'm not trying to be too controversial here, but the Nazis thought it was required to eliminate the Jews. Not just that it was okay, but that it was required. Well, ethically and morally, if you think that there's no truth, that there's no moral guidepost, that everything is an opinion, and every relative opinion, meaning it's relative to different people, is equally valid, when the Nazi comes to you and says, you have to help me hunt down all the Jews, you've got no reason to say no. Now, I'm sure you'll say no, but I mean, they'll go, come on, help me. And you just go, I don't want to. Wouldn't you rather have reasons to tell the Nazi why they're wrong? Why they should stop? Like I said, not a lot of Nazis running around today. It's a bit of a bombastic or controversial, provocative example. You can generalize that, though. If you insist, if you declare to others that moral values are relative, that there's no guidepost that we can all share, that there's no logic or rigorous way to think about ethics, you're basically saying you don't actually care what other people do. But you do care. You don't like Nazis. You don't like cannibalism. You don't like it when your neighbor lets their dog, go in your yard all the time. So there, one, I think you should be telling the Nazis to stop and giving them good reasons to stop. But you're also, again, being logically inconsistent. You're saying you have reasons. You'll tell everyone the reasons why you think it's bad that the neighbor's dog goes number 2 in your yard. But then you'll also say, well, there are no reasons. It's just opinion. You just called yourself a square circle, man. You said, I have reasons for why I think this, but there are no reasons to think this. Right? That's part of it about when you declare there are no reasons. I'm making a more general point here, not about the ethics of it. When you're saying that there are no reasons, you then always give proof or reasons for why you think that's true. So you immediately contradict yourself when you say there is no truth, there's only opinions. And by extension, when you say philosophy is only opinions because there is no truth, so philosophy and everything else is just another opinion. Because when I ask you, why do you think that is, you give me reasons. You give me things you think are true. So you violated the most basic rule of all human thought. You can't say something is and that it ain't at the same time. You can't say there are no reasons why anything is true and then give me reasons why you think that's true. You've just square circled yourself. Now, where we go from this is a whole other ball of wax. Okay? What sort of things are true? Are they true for all time? These are big questions. Just want you to say, if you start out from the standpoint of it's all opinions, there's no truth, that position, every version of it, contradicts itself instantly. And again, if that doesn't sound like a problem to you, I'm trying to make the point here that logically it's like saying square circle. Logically, it's like saying a squiggly line is the shortest line between 2 points. It's like saying you're human and not human. It's like saying the moon orbits the earth and the earth orbits the moon. Or saying that the sun is the biggest star in our solar system and saying it's the smallest star in our solar system. I mean, take a stand, right? It's one or the other. You can say whichever one you want, but you can't say both. Okay. Enough about that, right?